Hello and welcome to Sourcing in Procurement and Supply, Section 3 of Unit 2, Supply Chain Structures. We all know that businesses do not operate in vacuums, as for that matter need to put systems and structures in place to help conduct their operational activities. We will look at issues relating to supply chain structures in this section. By the end of the section, we should be able to distinguish between supply chain and networks, explain supply chain structures, explain supply tiering, and assess the implications of supplier tiering. In order to offer a better explanation to supply chains, consider a bottle of fresh fruit produced by ABC Limited. ABC Limited has contact with farmers who grow the pineapples. Besides, ABC procure bottles, boxes and other materials to process the fresh fruit into the finished state. After that, ABC Limited may not have their own trucks and distribution outlets, so they decide to engage the services of transport companies and the supermarkets for distribution. Financial institutions may be involved because of payment. ABC will need power from ECG, water from Ghana Water Company. Do we think ABC can provide all these by themselves? The answer is no. We realize that ABC alone cannot get a bottle of fresh fruit to the supermarket. That is, they cannot plant their own pineapples, generate their own energy and water to process it, design their own packaging, operate their own transport system, and sell all by themselves. Because of this, ABC will need to rely on different firms to get a bottle of fresh fruit to the market. So bringing all these firms together in order to finally get a bottle of fresh fruit to the market is what we refer to as the supply chain. We define supply chains as the network of independent yet interdependent firms who are involved in transforming raw materials into value for the end user or consumer. Or the supply chain encompasses all organizations and activities associated with the flow and transformation of goods from the raw material stage through to the end user, as well as the associated information flow. So here the supply chain will include the stage where we get our raw materials, the supplies we get our raw materials from, the conversion phase where value is added to our raw materials, through to the output phase where complete value has been added to the materials, the semi-finished goods, to complete it, and finally sent out to the wholesalers and retailers for customer pickups. The supply chain is a network of firms. There should be a network with every single actor connected before we can call it a supply chain. Once one actor is taken out of the chain, then it's no longer a chain. Everything should be connected in a network. So for instance, if logistics companies that distribute our finished goods to our distributors and retailers are out of the chain, then after producing, the finished output will be stored at our warehouses with no way of getting them to the market. Then then we can call this a supply chain. It's not complete. Something is missing. So before we can say a supply chain is complete, all actors must be connected. There should be a network of all actors. Supply chain structures. We established in Unit 1 that some supply chains are very complex, whereas some supply chains are very simple. The issue of supply chain optimization came in where we looked at the optimal number of suppliers or the right number of suppliers a buying organization would want to do business with at a particular time or at a point in time. And if we end up with very few suppliers, then we say the supply chain is not complex. However, we may end up with a whole lot of suppliers. Then we say our supply chain is complex. Remember, we don't only have suppliers in our supply chain, right? We also have our customers, our distribution outlets, a whole lot of actors in our supply chain. When we after everything and realize these actors are a whole lot, then we can say our supply chain is complex. That is the supply chain complexity concept. One way of optimizing the supply base and or determining the complexity of supply chain is through the development of supplier tiering. Supplier tiering is a form of supply-based management in which suppliers are organized such that only first-tier suppliers deal directly with the buying organization. Let me use an example to explain this. As a buying organization or as a focal firm into the production of cocoa or no, let's just say chocolate, at the end of the day, I have suppliers of chocolate, suppliers that supply me with milk, people that will supply me with sugar, water, electricity, the packaging, and the boxes. As a focal firm, as an organization, I can decide to manage all these suppliers by myself. That is, I will personally closely monitor the activities of each and every single supplier in my supply chain. That's what because I am directly managing the suppliers are directly under me, they are reporting directly to me. These suppliers are my first tier suppliers. A buying organization can only do this when the supply chain is not complex, when we don't have a lot of suppliers that supply us requirements. However, in an instance where we have a lot of suppliers where we can't manage by ourselves, for instance, in a case where we have about 50 suppliers, out of which only 2 suppliers are key or are core suppliers. Then, as a way of optimizing your supply base, it is advised that organizations tier their supply chains such that only first tier suppliers have direct relationship or contact with the buying organization. So in this case, out of my 50 suppliers, only 2 suppliers are core. So I take these 2 suppliers out, and then these 2 suppliers are directly under me. They report to me. I monitor the activities closely. Now we have 48 suppliers remaining in our supply chain. So we say we go to the first supplier. How many suppliers do you think you can manage for the buying organization based on some criteria or based on the requirements the supplier supplies to us? So for instance, the first out of the 2 suppliers, one supplier supplies us with cocoa, or one supplier is our main supplier of cocoa. However, among the remaining 48, we also have suppliers of cocoa or substitutes for cocoa in the supply chain. Then we realize that we can classify those, or we can group those other suppliers of cocoa and the substitute of cocoa under the main supplier of cocoa, because that main supplier of cocoa knows the industry better and can manage and understand those other suppliers better. So at the end of the day, we realize we have about 10 suppliers under our main supplier of cocoa. So that main supplier of cocoa is going to manage those 10 suppliers under him or her. Those 10 suppliers are going to report all their shortcomings or anything they want to report to us, the top manage the focal firm. They're going to report to that supplier, and that supplier will communicate to us. You realize it's almost impossible having to deal with 50 or more suppliers by yourself. You don't even have the manpower, you don't have the resources, you don't have the time to deal directly with these suppliers, to manage the relationships with these suppliers closely. However, you can invest resources into managing or developing 2 core suppliers effectively. Perhaps those 2 key suppliers that you've identified out of the 50 suppliers can also manage the relationship of the other suppliers effectively for you. So we say that those 2 key suppliers that we've identified out of the 50 suppliers that are directly under the buying organization, those suppliers form our first tier suppliers. So we've torn them out of the lot. So we've like supply tiering something out of something. So we've tiered those 2 suppliers out of the 50 suppliers. So that's our first tier suppliers. Then those suppliers that we've grouped under our first tier suppliers, those that are reporting directly to our first tier suppliers, we have those to be our second tier. Then if we have another group of suppliers under reporting to our second tier, and we have other suppliers under our second tier suppliers, those become our third tier. So it goes on like that. So we've exhausted our supply chain, our suppliers. So the third tier will report to the second tier. Then the second tier will report to the first tier. Then the first tier will report to us. So instead of dealing with about 50 or more suppliers a day, realize that we are only dealing with 2 suppliers. And even because those 2 suppliers know the industry better than we, the buying firm, they're able to come up with better, quicker solutions to those under them, had it been that those suppliers would report to us directly. That's what we refer to as supply chain tiering or supplier tiering. Just tiering our suppliers so that such that only the first tier suppliers will report directly to the buying organization. And when this is done, the organization has enough resources to manage their supply base efficiently. And even though you are not directly monitoring the activities of your other suppliers, in a way you are monitoring their activity. This approach will also help minimize costs in our supply chain. In summary, we defined and detailed the concept of supply chain. We also explained what entails supply chain structure, specifically in the development of supplier tiering. Issues of supply tiering was heightened with examples. Thank you.